If you're a rapper, your friend's a rapper, this is a must-watch episode for you. Today, we interview lawyer Claire White. She represents rappers like EBK, J-Bo, and more, and she tells you the pitfalls to avoid as a rapper if you don't want to go to jail. Very important and informative episode, so without further ado, let's check this out. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special episode, and I think all the rappers that watch this channel, you're going to want to stay and watch to the end because you're going to get some absolute gems of advice from a lawyer. And I think in your professional network, everyone should have a lawyer. Let's just start there. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I became a lawyer because everyone in my life needed one and no one could afford one. You know, I think that if you're fortunate enough to have your shit together enough to get a lawyer in advance or at least have a relationship with one, then that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, especially even if it's as simple as someone that can help look over documents for you. Oh, you're about to purchase this property. You're going to get signed to this deal. I've married into a family of lawyers, so that's good on the front end. It wouldn't be good on the back end, you know what I mean? But the thing is, I think they're very good people to have on your side.
Yeah, it's always shocking to me how many people enter big contracts or buy and sell things and there's just nothing in writing at all. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, what are you doing? You're dealing with big money. Nothing's in writing. Yeah, a lawyer in 5 minutes can go over a piece of paper with you and make things all legitimate so that you're protected. People only think they need lawyers when shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Claire, in a weird way, our worlds are intertwined. Neither of us are criminals, but we happen to spend a lot of time navigating kind of the underworld or the fringes of society in a way.
Sure. I mean, in my line of work, I realized that people facing criminal charges are not the fringes, right? We live in an era of mass incarceration. 1 in 3 black men in this country will serve time in prison or jail. So that's not a fringe, right? But it definitely, they're made to feel that way for sure.
So why, I guess a question about that, why is it that you think that 1 in 3 black men might face incarceration, but not 1 in 3 Cambodian men or Chinese men?
Anti-black racism. It's not that complicated, right? I don't know if anyone's ever read The New Jim Crow. Incarceration is slavery.
Who wrote that book? That's not Mr. Coates?
No, that was Michelle Alexander.
Okay.
It's slavery we thought was made illegal, but there's an exception to the anti-slavery amendment to the Constitution, and it's for incarcerated people. So,
and as part of what we're getting into here, the when prisoners can work for 27 cents an hour for places like Walmart or Victoria's Secret, and is that kind of what you're getting at?
I mean, that's part of why they're able to make them do that is because they're enslaved, right? But yeah, I mean, their freedom is literally removed, right? They live in cages, so.
Yeah, it does seem really dirty when to pay someone 27 cents an hour. I mean, I guess, and the fact that the taxpayer dollar, we already pay, what is it like? Is it like $90,000 on average per year per inmate is the cost? But then when you see their housing conditions, their food, it's like how I'm living on less than $90,000 a year. How is this guy who's sharing a cell with someone and eating crap food $90,000 a year? I guess the guards and things like that, but something seems a little off about it to me. The for-profit prison world.
Yeah, it's the prison industrial complex. Prison is big business, whether it's a private prison or a government prison, where the contractors are all, brought in to build them. I mean, we built more prisons in California than colleges. We spend more on every year of incarceration for an individual than we do on education for each student. We see where our government's priorities are when we start looking at where the money goes, and in the system that we live in here in the police state, the money goes to prisons and incarcerating people as opposed to on the front end, educating people and giving them opportunities.
So, and a lot of these, I think a lot of these problems have no clean answer, but I guess what do we do with somebody that there's shot somebody dead in the street? I know there's so many different, it could be, there's a lot of different situations. That's a very general statement, but what do we do with the people that are causing danger to a community?
It's pretty tough, danger is such a broad term, right? I mean, for one thing, we've been incarcerating people who are drug addicts in this country for a long, long time. And
It
that's
seems to be
obviously
working really well. The rate of drug use is going way down around here, right?
right. And at like the rate of violence too, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, prison is not a deterrent. It doesn't stop crime. I don't have good answers about like what we do with people who've harmed other people. But I do know that enslavement isn't the answer, right? So
Does it surprise you that prison isn't more of a deterrent? Because I don't know. I think I would have a panic attack if I was in a cell and knew that I was going to be there for years and there's all these fluorescent lights. I'm not sleeping well. I'm eating crap. I can't do what I want to do. That to me is a pretty strong deterrent, but I guess does it surprise you that it's not more of a deterrent? Because obviously it doesn't work.
I mean, no, it doesn't surprise me. I don't want to go to prison. You know what I mean? I'm with you. Like that would be awful. Prison's a fucked up place. But what we have in this country is like a cultural problem of like people not having value for their lives, not seeing a future, you know, not having opportunity, being raised in generations of people who have gone to prison. It becomes like culturally normalized. Like a lot of my young folks who are living wild, you know, they expect to not live past the age of 25 anyway, or they expect to go to prison at some point, or their friends are in prison, or their parents went to prison, or, you know, it becomes like a generational problem. And when the expectations in someone's mind get set so low, or the expectations for them get set so low, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And what we're also talking about is like a lot of young people are getting incarcerated and they're not thinking about consequences for a lot of reasons. That has to do with like brain development, that has to do with trauma, you know, that has to do with poverty. Like, there's lots of reasons people don't think about the consequences of their actions. And a lot of people just don't ever think they're gonna get caught.
I think, like, if you look, when you look at this politically, like the left side of the spectrum says it's a system issue, and the right side of the spectrum says it's an individual issue. And I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Like, do you think what do you think it would take to get the standard to be raised, where the priorities are different? Like, hey, around here, we become engineers, or we become, I guess, productive members of society. Like, what do you think it would get to change that tide?
Gosh, these are big, big questions. I mean, capitalism is like a sickness, you know? And while we live in a place where like a couple of people are shitting on golden toilet seats and everyone else is like bartering over food stamps, we're not going to solve these problems. You know, like it's a material problem. It's a problem of racism. Like white supremacy and capitalism have been like the driving forces of the last century in this country and globally. And we're dealing with the consequences of that. Like what has to happen on a micro level? Man, opportunity for young people, better education, exposure to people who are in solid professional careers, a living wage where they realize that they can actually pay their rent and save some money and live good doing normal work, as opposed to, you know, ruining their fucking daily existence for $10 an hour at Taco Bell when it's a lot easier and quicker and whatnot to go do crime. You know, it's a big problem. The answers are also big, but I don't think that's a reason that we shouldn't try them, right?
I definitely agree that it's to think far into the future. You kind of have to have the luxury of not living day to day and very tight and desperate, and that definitely is a factor for why these things are happening. And the thing. So as far as the whole I got the white supremacy thing. If you look at what races in this country are performing the best, can you guess the 3 races that are making the most money in this country?
Oh my goodness. No, I don't know.
Indian Americans, Chinese Americans, and what was the other? Nigerian Americans. The Nigerian Americans are the most educated pound for pound, and I don't know. It's hard for me to buy the white supremacy thing when I see other groups are even outperforming whites. Like I feel like if you look at what these cultures that are outperforming whites are doing, it's obvious. They're outworking everybody else. They're educating themselves. The priorities are different. And I think we don't ever want to rob someone from the ability to dream big. You know what I mean?
I feel you. And individually, people overcome really fucked up circumstances to
Right.
do big things, right? That doesn't take away the structural barriers that they faced. And just to like point at someone, my late husband grew up in foster care. He was Black. He got a PhD by the time he was 30, right? But he used to hate it when people would point at him and go, oh, well, if he could do it, that means you could have done it.
Right.
Right? The structural barriers are huge. When we're looking at immigrant populations or Asian populations, because when you say Nigerian American, I'm assuming that you mean descendants of Nigerian immigrants or Nigerian immigrants themselves, as opposed to people who are descendants of slaves,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And anti-Black racism in America is like a unique, fucked up brand of racism because of the legacy of slavery in this country, and then Jim Crow, and then now mass incarceration. The sentencing disparities, like anti-Black racism in this country is undeniable. And so when we look at like why are so many Black children eventually filtered into the prison system, I think that the answer is staring us right in the face, and everyone wants to kind of tap dance around it. So white supremacy itself, like, sure, certain model minority groups can do very well, right? And a lot of them have opportunities that allow them to sidestep what actual anti-Black racism looks like in this country. But, just because some folks can get through the door doesn't mean that the door isn't slammed shut on a lot of people. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't dream big, but the American dream is something that blames individuals for not being successful, as opposed to recognizing structural inequalities and barriers and providing opportunities for folks to be able to excel.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to look at the world and a lot of, I guess, explanations that can make sense. I think I always want to root on somebody. Like, I never want to start someone off by saying, look, you're absolutely fucked from the jump. There's nothing you're going to do to get ahead. So why even try? Because I think that robs them from the adventure that their life can become. And
Yeah, sure. I mean, acknowledging the problem isn't the same thing as tell people you're fucked from the jump, so why even try, right? It's an understanding that the problem exists, and we have to acknowledge the problem if we want to solve it. We have to. And recognizing that that is the issue in this country is something that should motivate us to do things to solve it, right? Like the dystopian nature of all of that, the like, man, we're fucked, like that exists already. It's not like we're putting that on someone by acknowledging that the barriers that they already face, right? It's just about honesty.
because that's one thing I've been seeing with some of the younger folks, especially growing up in really tough neighborhoods, is almost like a form of nihilism where their life doesn't matter, your life doesn't matter. And so, yeah, I don't care if I steal a key and drive 100 miles an hour through a red light. Like, what does it matter? Like, I don't really, it's almost an expression that they don't think they can become anything, or they're not worth anything because they almost don't value their own life or anyone else's. And it seems like it's come from a place of like, this world is kind of fucked and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to live on the edge while I can.
I mean, the world is kind of fucked, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not wrong about a lot of that, It's why it's tough when I come face to face with these individuals who are actually doing that and the shit has hit the fan, which lands them in my office, I mean, there's a lot of conversations that have to happen about like what can be done to change your life if you want to change your life, right? Like,
And
what
that's
can
a
be
big
done?
piece if you want to change your life.
And some folks are ready and some folks aren't. And providing opportunity to get them there and providing support. And a lot of these kids just have literally never had someone sit down and even hear their story or give a fuck. A lot of what I do in my job, it feels like, is just tell other people's stories. And when they see someone fighting for them, whether that's in the courtroom or whether that's in City Hall or whether that's in the schools or whatever, I don't know. I like to think that when someone else shows you that your life is valuable, that helps you believe that your life is valuable, right?
Definitely. I think one thing we could get into is, I think what most rappers maybe aren't aware of, that they can trip themselves up. I'll start off with a little anecdote and then you can jump in and fill in the pieces. But we were with a group in Chicago and they were completely unaware that if they used it. They showed their gun with a switch to the camera, and the thumbnail for their music video that they were publishing to the world was like 4 or 5 switches pointed at the camera. And I had to call them up and say, look, like that really, that's a Fed case, dude. Like you got to really be careful about what you put out. And the cameraman wasn't telling him that. And this guy even had a manager. And I don't know if he was telling him about that. But there's some pretty easy things to avoid to not get yourself in trouble. And I think maybe that'll be a really good segment for a lot of our viewers are, what are some of the top things you've seen people do? Maybe they're unaware of the rules or unaware of how to navigate, and they've shot themselves in the foot by doing that. So where are some things we can go with here?
Okay. I mean, first, I kind of want to start by saying I don't think, at least in my experience, that people are necessarily unaware that sort of thing can get them in trouble.
They just don't care.
They just don't care.
Yeah.
Or they think that it's not going to be them, right? They see everyone else doing it. Not everyone else is going to prison. So, like, why would it be them?
Which we think about in a lot of situations, texting and driving, drinking and whatever. There's a lot of, that's an easy thing to think it's not going to be me.
Right. Or they think maybe that it's not going to be as serious as it actually is if they do get caught, right? Like, there's a lot of, like, jailhouse lawyering type of mentality about it, where they'll give each other really shitty advice, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, people are under the misconception that if it's just a picture of a gun, well, then they can't prove it's a real gun. They, being the police, can't prove it's a real gun, right? And the reality is they don't actually have to in most circumstances. Or, like, the time when it would come to actually prove it's a real gun, like, what, you're going to go to trial behind this and risk 15 years or 20 years or whatever? Like, no, most people are taking a deal. Like, 98% of cases end up in plea bargains, you know? So it's like, yeah, sure, maybe you have some action that somebody could go and argue that that's not a real gun, that you used a fake gun, and we could, you know, I mean, do you have prop receipts for it? Like, do you, you know, can you prove it wasn't real? But the risk that the gamble you're taking to actually fight that fight is so high.
Because if you say no to the plea deal and then it goes to trial, there's no going back from that. That's kind of a point of no return.
I mean, once you start a trial, I mean, if you get convicted, the judge can sentence you, you know, and usually, most times, when you lose at a trial, your sentence is going to be a lot worse than whatever deal got offered to you. But yeah, so them thinking that, oh, they can't prove it's a real gun because it was on camera. They never found the gun. So, you know, that's not enough to get a gun case. That's not true. Like, you can be prosecuted for posting pictures of guns, especially if you are what they call a prohibited person, right? So if you have a prior felony, if there's some legal reason you're not allowed to have guns and you're posting them, that becomes a lot more of an issue than if, you know, you're just a regular, you know, person without any criminal history and you're posting guns. I hate guns on the internet. I just hate seeing them. I'm a gun owner, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a military veteran. Like, I think everyone should arm themselves. I'm not an anti-gun person. Should you be posting them all over the internet when you have felony record? Like, no, you should not be doing that.
I think the temptation of the flex sometimes is just too hard to pass up, it feels like.
I get it. And I don't like to tell people how to do their art. I'm not an artist, you know? Like, there's a reason that it's commercially successful to, like, show a bunch of guns all over your stuff. Like, the audiences love it. You know, the marketers love it. The labels seem to love it. And that fucking sucks. Like, that is a whole different cultural problem. But, like, that's one of the major things is the whole showing guns is in people thinking they can't get in trouble just because they're on a video. The way to get around that is to actually use prop guns. They look real. They are real. They just pull the firing pin out. You get them from a company. You have a receipt that shows that date. That way, if you ever do get called to the carpet about it, you actually can prove that, you know, it wasn't real. Your audience isn't going to know.
It is really smart. I think the downfall there is this kind of an ego thing, like, oh, you a bitch if you don't have a real gun is kind of the mentality. But I think if the mentality could be shifted to this is how we beat the system, then it might be more encouraged.
Maybe. I mean, the people that I work with who are showing guns in videos are people who really do need guns in real life.
Yeah.
So it's less about, you know...
It's not a marketing pitch.
It's not a marketing pitch.
It's part of the
it's
everyday...
how they live. Yeah, it's how they live. They are gonna, you know, a lot of them have been shot. Their family members have been shot. Their friends have been shot. They see a lot of violence. People are targeting them. life is dangerous where they come from. Just because they get some money or just because you see their songs on YouTube or whatever, that doesn't change the level of danger that they face. And for a lot of them, it increases the level of danger they face, So, but the ones that go on camera can be fake, right? And then the ones that you have in your bag or like in the studio with you somewhere else, those could be real, you don't have to be unarmed. But I just, prefer when people don't put real guns on camera. So that's a thing. That's a thing. A worse mistake that I see rappers make. I represent a lot of rappers. It's like 50% of my clientele. And the worst mistake that I see them making is in the lyrics. It's in the lyrics and in the images in the videos, and not necessarily the guns. That's part of it, but it's this gang shit, And there's new laws in a lot of places that protect rap lyrics so that they can't be used as much as they used to be used.
It's the artistic expression kind of thing.
Yeah,
Is that
that's the idea behind these changes in the law. Both artistic expression and also the fact that the use of rap lyrics essentially has a racial component to it, right? They're not using lyrics from other types of music, regardless of how violent it might be, regardless of like the content. They're not using country songs and rock songs and all this in court like that. They're only pretty much using rap lyrics. And so that's why the laws are changing. But they still can use them. And that's what people, I think, who are making this music don't realize. Like they'll see an Instagram little clip talking about, oh, now they can't use rap lyrics, and they think that then they're scot-free. It's like, no, that's not the truth. They still can use them, especially if they're specific.
That's the thing. Like when you see a rapper and they're like, I shot Timothy at 2:00 on July 11th, like that's probably not a good idea to do, right?
Not a good idea. And these gang cops, they will get on the stand. People think using like slang or like code words or whatever, makes it so that they can't get in trouble for it, or they're not going to know what you're talking about. Like, no, they know what you're talking about.
Do they bring like a rap linguist to the stand? They're like, can you please break down what bussin' respectfully means on the stand? Does that ever happen in court?
I think that would be more appropriate than what they actually do. Because what they actually do is they use cops, and these cops will say that they're a gang expert because they've been doing gang cases for this long, or they're a human trafficking expert because they've been doing pimp cases for this long, and they'll say this word means this word means that, and a lot of times they're wrong, right? Or sure, it can mean that in a very specific context, but that's not really what the guy was saying. That's not what he meant in that moment. But these juries, they listen to these gang cops. They listen to what they say when they hear their years of experience and all the cases they've done. And these jurors aren't from where these kids are from. They're not speaking the same language, right? And so they trust these cops.
A jury isn't from the same place where the crime was committed?
I mean, they're drawn from the same county, but who's showing up for jury duty, right? Not the kids making these rap videos are not showing up for jury duty, and their friends are not showing up for jury duty. Even if they get summoned, they're not showing up. And the other thing is like, who can serve on a jury? Well, only recently did they even change the law so that felons can serve on as jurors. Like they, in some states still, but like if you have a felony in a lot of places, you can't even serve on a jury.
That's one thing that's a little messed up. And I can see the explanations for both sides. Like, should a felon be able to own a gun? I can see the pros and cons of that. But to me, it's almost like, have you served your time? And is that the penalty? Like, is it still that felons can't vote? Is that still a thing?
It depends where you're at, but in California, felons can vote. If you're in California and you're a felon, you can vote.
That seems outrageous that you wouldn't be able to vote. You've served your 10 years and you can't vote. That just seems...
I hate when people are penalized for past crimes for almost anything. The idea that you would have to like register as a gang member, which is a thing in California, gang registration, or the firearms restriction. Like, I think that it's...
I mean, could you see someone that has shot up 17 people and robbed 4 banks, if that guy buys a gun again, it could be a risk?
Well, he's probably not getting out.
Yeah.
Right? The most dangerous people are probably not getting out. So, but no, if you have a felony for check fraud, you can never own a gun again. And that's ridiculous. Like it's not just violent felonies, it's any felony, and you cannot own a gun ever again legally.
Do you think it's fair if you've done a violent crime that you would be restricted from owning a gun? Or do you think it's case by case?
I think it's case by case. I mean, and I'd rather err on the side of like, let people own firearms legally, because people own firearms illegally. It is not hard to get an illegal firearm. It's just not.
Maybe that's another loophole that's not talked about as much. It's not really a loophole. It's just doing it by the books. Like if a lot of these crews just all went together and registered and got it, like they would never have to worry again.
That's something I've been promoting for a while now. Like I really, when I start working with a client, usually, I mean, I get very deeply involved in my clients' lives. You know, like my clients are family. You know, I go show up to baby showers. I'm at, family events. I know their kids and their parents. You know, I'm like deeply involved in their lives, and so I'm at the studios and the music video shoots and all that. And so I try to find every person in their life who's not a felon and like, hey, you registered to own a firearm? You have a registered firearm? Do you have a license to own a firearm? Because the more like legal firearm registrations you have around you, the more protected you are. And if you, the client, don't have a prior felony and you're not a prohibited person, like there's no reason for you not to get a licensed firearm. Like, why not? I really, really want more people to get legal firearms who can, instead of just getting illegal ones just cause
And it's so accessible too. It's like what, $50 or $100 to get your gun license in a lot of like, what was it in Wisconsin? I feel like it was something where it was like, that's it, like $50 and I'm in.
It's super easy to get a license.
You go to like one class and
you take a little firearms class. I mean, in California, it's very different to have a license to own a firearm versus having a license to carry a firearm, right? And getting what's called a CCW, a license to carry concealed, because there's no open carry in California. To get a license to carry a concealed firearm, in some certain places especially, it's very difficult. It's controlled by the sheriff's department or whoever, and you have file an application, try to prove you're a good enough person, and some counties barely give any of them out at all unless you're like a retired cop. But having a license to own a firearm is super easy to get. Super easy to get. Now, if you don't know if you are allowed to own a firearm or not, basically, like a lot of people forget their own criminal record, which is kind of crazy to me, but people just don't remember.
Yeah, that's kind of absurd.
Yeah, but if you need a copy of your own criminal record anywhere in the country, if you want your rap sheet, you go to and you get your live scan fingerprints done. Google like live scan location near me. It costs like $25. You go and you do your fingerprints. They'll send you your rap sheet to your house or whatever address you put. It's not gonna like alert the authorities you did it. People get scared about that. And then you can look at it and then you take that to a lawyer's office and be like, hey, because sometimes they're a little hard to understand, really. They're not written very clearly. But you take it and you're like, am I allowed to own a firearm? Because if you apply for a firearm and you're not allowed to have one, that in and of itself is a crime.
Have you ever seen a dude's rap sheet that was just so long and ridiculous that you're just like, dude, what are you doing out here? Like, what's going on?
I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, some people have rap sheets that are like phone books, but it's rarely surprising. Like, you get a client, you hear what type of situation they're dealing with. One of my first questions is if people have prior criminal record, because it really changes the game in terms of what we can do, so.
Because California is a 3-strike state?
It is. If you have 2 prior strikes and you catch a serious or violent felony, then you go to prison for life.
And is a strike a felony, or is a strike, it can...
A strike is a serious or a violent felony. That's what the law says. So like check fraud as a felony is not a strike.
Okay.
Robbery is,
Makes sense.
Yeah, the list of strike offenses is very long, and there's certain things that are surprising that they're strikes. But yeah, you catch a third one and you face life in prison, So, and that's like, I don't know, I had a client recently who was debating whether he should take this strike because it would have been his second. And he was like, man, if I do that, like if I hit someone with a bottle in the club, that's a third strike. Or like you get in a fight with your baby's mom, that's a third strike, So the 3 strikes rule is horrible. It's extremely fucked up.
So this guy, he's considering taking a strike. Does that mean part of his plea deal is you'll get less time, but you'll get a strike?
Sometimes it's you'll get less time, but you'll get a strike. But yeah, a plea deal, if you're taking a plea deal is what charge are you going to take and what's the punishment for it, right? So a lot of times if they make an offer and the charge that they want you to take is a strike, that's a big consideration, because if you take a strike, then that means if one strike, your first strike in California, then any crime you commit after that, whether it's a strike or not, any crime, you could face double the punishment.
It seems it's such a tough thing, because I think a lot of it, you have to make these rules that affect hundreds of thousands or millions of people, but then within each of that is an individual story. But at the same time, you want to do something that decentivizes further violent crimes. Seems like one giant hairball that I'm glad I'm kind of not involved in the decision making of.
I wish I was involved in the decision making of it.
It sounds like you'd be giving a lot of guys get back out there and get in the game.
I would close every prison.
Close every prison.
Day one, I would close every prison.
Okay, and then what happens to all those fellas that are in prison?
They're free and they live their lives. You know what I mean? Like
every one of those guys, you think, just go back out in society?
Yeah, look, folks are not monsters.
Some folks are.
Some folks are monsters.
Actually,
that's real.
Hold
But
on.
a very small
Let
percentage.
every
of people are
single
monsters.
person out of prison back into freedom.
That'd be the first thing I do, yeah.
Okay, so what would you do to deter rapes, robberies, assaults? What would you do to deter that?
Wow. You mean if like I was in charge of the whole world? I'm not totally sure what I would do to deter it. I mean, I know what we have now isn't working, you know? And so to say like, we need a better solution before we end incarceration. It's like, no, we don't, because we already aren't deterring it. Rapes and robberies and murders are happening every day in this country. And we have millions of people in prison. So like, would I let millions of people out of prison? Yeah, I would, you know?
So agree that mass incarceration, like I feel like we need to change the model. But like I think one thing that has made the Bay Area and San Francisco so wild and so lawless, like right now, theft is not punished. You bip a car, who cares? If you boost a bunch of jackets from Dick's Sporting Goods, who cares? And when the answer to those crimes is who cares, it only increases. And
You've been watching too much right-wing propaganda. That's
but
not
let's
true.
get real here.
No, I know. But what I'm telling you
think
is-
someone should just be able to walk into your business and steal less than $1,000 worth of stuff, and that's okay?
It's not just, the law doesn't say it's okay in California. People assume that.
But no one gets enforced by it. I'm talking to bippers and boosters. I'm talking to on the phone. Yeah, there's really no punishment. Like we just keep doing it.
That's not true. And their minds need to be changed about that. They need to be educated about that, which is a lot of what I try and do on my social media platform. Because no, you do still get in trouble for robbing a store.
They seem pretty casual about it. They seem like no big deal. We'll walk in there, we walk out, and I think when it's not your business that's being taken from, or it's not your window that's been smashed, or not your house that's been graffitied, it's easier to be like, yeah, it's no big deal. But when it comes to your front door, I think it becomes a real serious issue.
Yeah, I'm not saying theft is good. You know what I mean? I'm not saying people should be stealing, especially from small mom and pop stores, individual persons, their residences. You know what I mean? I'm not promoting theft.
Big corporations are better to steal, or okay?
Wow, that gets into revolutionary philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not shedding any tears for Walmart at all. I don't care if people are stealing from there.
So, but it's something that just happened in Chicago. The couple Walmarts they had in Chicago, which for some people in the food deserts, which like if you're on the system is the issue side of the coin, you would say people need places to get food. Walmart got theft. The theft was so rampant that they were losing money, and they had to shut their doors. And then people want to say, "Oh, it's racist," and it's like it's about the money. If Walmart was making money there, they would be there perpetually. They would never close their doors. But the security costs, the inventory theft. I mean, so stealing from a big corporation. I know it's easier because their pockets are bigger and we have more. I get the anti-corporate attitude. I really do. But that Walmart is going to leave a hole in that community. A lot of people are going to have a tougher time in their life because of it.
That's true. I feel you. I mean, I have a lot to say about like the reasons why Walmart and Target and whatnot shut down their stores, and they claim it's because of theft. I get that. And I have a lot to say about that. But instead, what I'm going to say is that there are better ways to serve a community's food needs than a fucking Walmart, right? In the absence of a Walmart, it doesn't mean now we're fucked, right? Like there are sustainable models that communities can use to bring food and groceries and whatnot in their communities. Like we don't have to have food deserts. That's a man-made problem, and corporations are not the solution. But back to the original discussion about like theft is still a crime in California. People still get punished for it. If you go into a business and you steal things, or if you break into someone's car and you steal something, you can and will be prosecuted if you're caught. Like, how severe is the punishment? Are you going to regular jail or are you going to prison? Are you doing months versus years? It depends on who you are. It depends on whether there was any violence or threats involved. It depends on how much you stole. Sure. But do I want to see someone going to prison because they stole less than $1,000 worth of shit? Absolutely not. And it's not going to stop theft. It's not. Because I watched a girl who was 19 years old go to prison behind stealing some fucking sweatshirts out of Victoria's Secret because she pushed the security guard on her way out, which makes it a strong arm robbery, which is a strike, right? So like these people in, especially the new San Francisco, all these tech bros and rich people who've moved into San Francisco and changed the whole culture of the city, they all want to whine and cry about how, oh, we're not tough enough on crime. Like, what a shitty thing for San Francisco to be saying of all places in the country. Like, we used to be better than that in California. We used to be better than that in the Bay Area. And the idea that they think that locking these kids up because they're stealing some shit is the answer is just a sad state of affairs.
Well, I guess what is the alternative? Because we've traveled to a lot of places in the country. San Francisco is unique as far as the theft. There's a culture of strong, there's professional full-time thieves that's what they do. And like, I think the concentration, this has got to be the theft capital of America. Like, you don't have it like this as much in other places. And part of it is because there's no consequence.
Well, I think part of it, rather than there not being consequence, because there are consequences. Once again, there are consequences. But one of the reasons that I think San Francisco is the theft capital of the world is because it costs like $5,000 to have a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. Like, the cost of living in San Francisco is so crazy that, and there's like this influx of tourists at all times. It's such a major tourist city, and in major tourist cities globally, you see more theft than you do in rural communities. People are just easier targets. They have all their bags in their car. You know what I'm saying? They're traveling with lots of money, you know, because they're coming on some lengthy vacation from somewhere really far away. And that makes them more lucrative targets and easier targets. And that's why theft is happening in San Francisco. It's not because like, oh, we know we won't get in trouble if we steal in San Francisco. People go to jail every day in San Francisco for theft. Every single day. Not everyone's getting caught. And because this right-wing media machine is out here telling everyone that no one's getting in trouble, guess what? These kids hear that too. And so they're out here thinking there's no consequences for it, but there are consequences for it. You know, our jails are full of people who are over theft crimes, you know, full.
So what is the alternative? And how do we to deter theft?
How do you stop people from stealing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, that's a material problem. And what I mean by material is that's a money problem. Right? Like, if we had affordable housing in places like San Francisco, if milk didn't cost $7 a gallon, right? If gas didn't cost like a week's pay to fill your tank up, you know, like the cost of living has been skyrocketing around the country,
right? Skyrocketing.
And people are getting desperate. I'm not saying all these kids bipping windows are desperate, but they're not rich kids either. You know, and we live in this culture where you're expected to be wealthy. Like, people are displaying wealth all over the internet. People are displaying wealth all over the television. You know what I'm saying? And there's this expectation that if you don't have fucking fancy jewelry on, then you're a piece of shit. You know, like, we need a cultural shift around the idea of wealth, around the idea of what people need. It's a big solution for a big problem once again, but that doesn't mean it's something that we shouldn't work on, you know, but jailing people behind it, No.
I guess I get that people are getting more squeezed than ever before. The cost of living is getting unattainable, and America seems like it's heading in a direction where it's like, is this? Are we going to be able to continue to have our country? Are we going to be continue to? It seems like we're heading for a breaking point where either we're going to have to take one fork in the road or the other. And so I definitely hear that. But I think like there's this idea that it's a victimless thing. Like if I take from Dick's Sporting Goods, who cares? No big deal. But when Dick's closes down and the 14 people that were there full time paid their rent there, well, they're affected. And there's a ripple effect within their families. And then, the bus driver that took some of those people to work, suddenly the bus is down on capacity. And okay, we can cut bus drivers in the city because there's not as many people that need. So like there is, that to me just is, I'm not going to say an unforgivable thing, but there are the people that are professional stealers. I'm going to run into a place and that's how I eat. There's no pride in that. There's no greater good in that. And
We call that boosting in the Bay. You talk about boosters, I feel you. Like, I wish people didn't choose to steal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I wish people had like better visions for their own life. I wish that they were more invested in their community, right? But there are reasons why they aren't. There are reasons why they aren't. And so am I going to condemn somebody for stealing? Like, no, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think people should be running in people's houses and stealing from individuals. Like, I hate getting fucking bipped. My car's been bipped repeatedly. Anyone who's from this area has had their car bipped a lot, and it sucks.
that's absurd. It's absurd.
I'm worried about being parked out front right now. I might get bipped in this neighborhood, Like, yeah, no, I think I told you when you were coming out here, like, do not leave a cigarette lighter in your car. It's going to get bipped, Like, people, the broad daylight, they'll do it right in front of you. Like, yeah, it happens, and it's an adjustment that you make living in the city, you know what I mean? And
I think
sucks.
what'll happen from that is everyone that has means will move, and it's only going to get worse.
Rich people are never going to give up San Francisco. Like, they're pushing people out. Like, that's what's going to happen. It's about power. It's like, who has the power, right? The bippers are not the kids who have the power. They're breaking windows, and it's not because they're the powerful people in the city.
They don't have the big institutional power. It's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts. There's their power.
Yeah, but honestly, sometimes big fucked up systems have to die before something better can be born. You know what I mean? Like, am I sad that rich people's cars get bipped? No, I'm not. Like, I wish that there was a better way, and I do think that there will be a better way, but...
I think we could go into a lot of different tangents about wealth inequality and...
I want to talk more about the mistakes these kids are making in
because
the raps.
one thing I have is they think if you have a music video, they think a get out of jail free card is if you publish, these are all props. And at the jiu-jitsu gym, I have a friend who's a homicide detective, and he said that there are a lot of police departments, especially big city, there are firearm experts on staff that can look at a music video and say, no, that's a legit firearm, and that music video could be used against you. Would you also advise rappers like, hey, that props disclaimer at the beginning is not a blanket coverage like you might think it is?
Yeah, no, that means nothing. You know what I mean? That's like putting, I don't own the rights to this music. Like, that means nothing. It has no legal power whatsoever. No, just saying something is a prop is not good enough. It has to be a prop, and you have to have a receipt for it. You have to rent it from a company. It's super cheap. So yeah, no, there's ways to do that correctly. A lot of like the really big, rich folks who are in this line of work do it correctly, So there are ways to do it. I encourage folks to use prop firearms in their videos if they're using firearms. There's no reason not to. It doesn't mean you have to be unarmed at all. And at this point, I'm almost a little less worried about the fact that people are posting firearms than I am about the other ways that rap music is being used against them.
Tell us about it.
So a lot of folks think their lyrics can't be used against them, right? And it's just not true. the more specific the lyrics are, the more problematic it is. I mean, if you're telling an exact story that mirrors a crime that happened, that you're accused of, those lyrics are going to be coming in, right? But
Is I don't know if it's YMW Melly. How does he say his first? Yeah, YM whatever. Something Melly. The Murder on My Mind guy, which is a good jam. If you're driving home from the club at 3 a.m., maybe that's a song you play. But I believe I was hearing that song was used as evidence against him. Are there any famous examples of this rapper said this in a song and it backfired that you can think of?
not off the top of my head. There are some. There's like some super famous ones. I get so like in my own world about my own cases,
Sure.
and I, have had lyrics used against my clients more than once. And a lot of times those lyrics, sometimes it's about specific crimes, right? Which is a problem. Like, please don't rap about crimes that you have actually committed. Like, you're the artist, be creative. You know what I mean? Like, you can still rap about the same subject matter, but like just not actually things that you've done. But a lot of the way that rap music's being used right now, which is so dangerous, is the gang shit. So, I mean, whatever, like gang rap, gangster rap is like a whole genre, right? So I get
The
it.
most popular genre. Like I think conscious rap has almost completely left the conversation at this point. Like when you turn on a radio song, like there's maybe a couple exceptions I can think of, like that Little Durk J. Cole song with the kids singing in the background. That's more on the line of conscious rap. But for the most part, like even a public radio station, it's like murder music that's slightly DJ edited to not have all the words in it that it has. But and I don't know if this connects to I've heard some conspiracies from TikTok that the prison industrial complex and the record labels are like in bed together and they're promoting the violent shit because it's going to help them fulfill their quotas. Am I smoking crack or am I onto something here?
I don't think it's that direct of a connection, right?
Okay.
But it is, there are two sides of the same coin, right? Like, they both have a financial interest in like promoting criminality, right? So for record labels and whatnot, it's a commercial interest because it's what sells, and it's what sells because it's what they're pushing, and it's like agenda setting, and it's obvious why it is beneficial for the prisons for people to be committing and promoting crime. What it is, the gang stuff. So when you're accused of a gang crime, one of the important things they have to do is prove that you're in a gang, right? And one of the main ways they've been doing that lately, especially for rappers, is they're pulling lyrics and images from the music and they're saying, look, you're claiming such and such gang. Like, you shout it out constantly in your music, or you're throwing gang signs in your videos, or you are, showing, it's fucked up, this is where the people are actually from, like showing certain street signs or like calling out people's names who are known gang members,
Is being in a gang itself a crime, or is it just the acts you do while in a gang is
I
a crime?
love that question. Participation in a criminal street gang is a crime.
Even if, let's just say I'm like, hey, these neighborhood Crips that are next door, I know a lot of the guys, I played football with them, I like them, I hang around with them, but I've never done anything personally, can I still get in trouble?
It depends. So in California, there is a list of like qualifiers that they use to go, okay, if you have a certain number of these, that means that you're a gang member, right? One of which is you associate with other gang members, right? So, gang tattoos.
Are we about to get investigate? We hang out with a lot of different crews. I wonder if we're on any lists anywhere.
I make that joke in court a lot, well, technically I'm like, I hit all of these markers, but it's not an exact science, and they use it in ways that they want to use it, right? And whenever there's like wiggle room about if they're going to apply a certain type of law or not, it always skews towards anti-Black racism, right? So that's why, these random white kids who like probably hit like several of the markers on those lists aren't being charged as gang criminals, and other people are.
Do you see it, like, so you're saying anti-Black, do you see it with Mexican crews? I don't know how much, like, do they get a pass, or
They do not get a pass. They do not get a pass. And in California in particular, No, Mexican kids are being charged with gang crimes a lot too, for sure.
Have you had any white gang clients?
Well, I've represented Hell's Angels chapters, so, but I haven't represented them in court on gang crimes where they've been charged as gang members.
But do they? Because I guess through the lens that I'm picking up from that you view the world, it's kind of let's say the white supremacy or the anti-black. Do the white Hell's Angels, do they get the benefit of the doubt in the system? Oh, it's a white guy, he's okay, or how does that work?
No, I mean, to some degree, you know what I mean? Like, it's white folks do get treated en masse better in the system than people of color do, indigenous people, black people, for sure.
Is it statistically, because I remember seeing this in the documentary 13 or 13th, that is it statistically proven that a black guy can do the same crime as a white guy and white guys will get less time?
I mean, it's kind of a funny math question, right? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, when you add up all of the, when you look at all of the sentencings, right, of like black folks who've done the same crime and white folks who've done the same crime, the worst punishments skew towards the black folks. Are there individual situations where a white defendant will get a worse sentence than a specific black defendant? Sure, right? But you don't see institutional racism until you step back and look at bigger numbers, sure. Right? So, are there white gangs in California and elsewhere? Yes. The cops seem to think that, because I've asked them this on the stand, like, do you know any white gangs? So I've had them laugh at the question, frankly. But they'll usually acknowledge that like specific motorcycle gangs, can be like white gangs.
One difference I've noticed is that, because we've been looking for motorcycle gangs or motorcycle clubs for a while, and we have some connections in Arizona we're pursuing, and we got some in New Jersey we're pursuing, and they're a lot harder to get on camera than a black crew. Mm-hmm. If I go into a city and I put on my story, hey, who wants to do a video? 20, 30 responses. I can get a brother, hey, take me to your neighborhood, boom. The white guys are a little bit more, maybe it's more so that also just the motorcycle club world. They're a little bit harder to penetrate.
That's interesting. I'm not totally sure why that is. I mean, frankly, I think it's kind of fascinating that you're able to get folks on camera who are engaged in a criminal lifestyle at all. So I don't know what they have, no offense, to gain from it, right?
I think for how it is that they know I'm not going to ask them incriminating questions. And also, a lot of these guys, I think if they were making all their money doing music, they would probably leave a lot of the street life behind. And we heavily feature their music in the episode. And so I think that's the allure. And then you have to edit certain things out because certain guys will like, we hit this lick, we got $100,000. And it's like, all right, we're going to thank you for the information, but we're going to have to cut that part out. So I also know how to edit it in a way that if they do say anything that's not a good idea to say, that, okay, that's going to be we're going to edit that out.
I think it's funny hearing you say that because it's one of the best and darkest parts of my work is that like people can speak to me without a filter, right? Like those conversations are private and they are secret. And so it takes a little while to build up trust a lot of times, but then eventually you like really hear how people are living it and really hear how they are getting it. And it is dark. The world is a very dark place for a lot of my folks, and the existences that they live can be very, very, very dark. But it makes me so cringy, like when I watch them go on interviews, because I just hate it. Because not everyone is as responsible as you are about cutting those things out or editing those things out, and they get themselves in a lot of trouble.
Another thing I never approach is the subject of beef. I never try and hey, you don't like this guy? Talk your shit. Like that's because I leave, we leave, and we go home, and we don't have to deal with that. But if someone ever were to pass away because we decide to hype it up and spice it up a little bit more, it's just not what I want on my conscience. So
I mean, I appreciate that. I have a few things to say on that. I mean, first of all, like I also stay out of street politics. I represent people who are like ready to kill each other. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of on all parts of it. Like there's clients I don't drive around with in my car because, I know that they're being
Not worth
targeted.
the risk.
Not worth the risk. But the street politics, the beef, right? The street politics, when that's in the music, I know why it's in there. I get it. I do. But that
it's kind of like
used in court all the time.
Yes.
That gets used in court all the time, Like if you're accused of a murder of somebody, you might not be rapping about their murder, but when you're speaking on them or their little crew or whatever, that gets used then as part of evidence that you had motive to kill somebody.
The thing about the world of beef that's so interesting to me is I think like, well, one, we are so attracted to conflict. Like my wife will watch kind of like a Desperate Housewives episode where Chrissy and Jenna, every episode they're yelling at each other, they're 3 margaritas in, but that's entertainment to a lot of people. And it's kind of similar in the rap world. Like the rapper that's like, I grow tomatoes in my garden in the back and I walk my ground. No one listens to the nice, like they want to listen to the, oh my gosh, they want to follow the beef. They want to get into the story. It's just something, I guess, as human beings, it's kind of like if there's a fight in a hallway in a school, everyone stops what they're doing and looks at it. I think it's in us. And I think it's definitely human nature. But then on the flip side of it, I think a lot of these kids, if they were to meet each other in another environment, maybe in a team sport, or they would be friends. A lot of them have a lot more in common. And their only differences to me that I notice are, well, this guy's on 35th Street and this guy's on 40th Street. And they kind of grow up inheriting things that they weren't even involved with when it started, but they have to carry that on. And I get that. But I think that if you could somehow remove all of that violence from the past and just have them hang out with each other, a lot of these guys would be like, I like you. I think.
Yeah, I think that you're right about that in part. You know what I mean? This idea that folks would get along in a different environment, I agree, and have a lot in common even. The disagreements between them usually go a lot deeper than just what neighborhood they're from, right? Because the level of violence is so high and so personal, and it's like they know way before the cops know who murdered who and who hurt who and who threatened who and who's hunting who. Like they know this, and so they feel rightfully like the system is not justice. The system's not going to get justice for them. It's not going to protect them. It's not going to get justice for their friends or their family. And they're looking for whatever version of it they can find, whatever they can control in terms of what justice looks like. And it's sad. It's really, really sad. And a lot of these, not a lot, I've definitely had situations with guys where I knew them, and it's not necessarily even gang shit, right? But like I knew them when they got along well or when they called each other brother, like when they were close, and then some shit happens and then they're literally ready to kill each other or send other people to do it, and watching that kind of like break down. I love my folks, I call them my kids. Like I love my folks. So seeing them at risk, seeing them risking everything, seeing them hurt other people or be hurt by other people is just like really devastating. Because these folks, it's like, we've been talking about them, I think, like this whole like, oh, dystopian, they're nihilists, but most of these folks, almost all these folks, have families who love them. They have people that they deeply love. They have relationships that are really important to them. They have value. They're funny. You know what I'm saying? They're kind, like sweet people. I
think almost most people on earth, if you get into a room with them one-on-one, most people on earth, you're going to find something in common and they're likable, And
that gives me confidence that we can close the prisons. There's something, this is my thought about that, right? Is that we are all better than the worst thing we've done. All of us. We are all better than the worst thing we've done, And so like people have done heinous fucking things. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that that's who they are, and trying to like nurture and foster and support and draw out that part of them that isn't that fucked up thing, People are all capable of change and redemption, all of them. It's just a matter of finding the right way.
Totally agree. One of my best friends on earth is a former bank robber, and he's one of the best men I know. And I agree. I think that the piece that I keep hearing is missing from the conversation is, like, I think all the change you talk about is a top-down effect. I don't think any real change will come unless it's from the bottom up.
Well, it's pretty tough when the bottom that we're talking about is like fucking incarcerated people.
And just to clarify, I mean like top-down, government down versus individual level up.
Right. And that's what I'm saying is that, like, there's a reason the system is set up the way that it is, right? This is on purpose. It's on purpose that most people are living in poverty. It's on purpose that most people's educations are fucked up. It's on purpose that most people don't know their rights. It's on purpose that most people can't afford a lawyer. It's on purpose that so many people are incarcerated. That benefits the people who are in power, right? Like, it helps them keep what they have and grow what they have. And so the idea of, like, yes, I too believe in bottom up change. I want that. But I just also acknowledge the intentional built-in barriers there are to prevent that. Like, my late husband was a revolutionary through and through. And he was what they call a vanguardist, right? Like, he recognized that, like, people who are having to scrape for, like, food, clothing, and shelter are at a place where they even have it in their day-to-day space to be able to, like, go and make revolutionary change.
Sure.
Right? And so it is incumbent upon those of us who have the privilege to do it, have the space to do it, have the resources to do it, to, like, look to the impacted folks for solutions and then do what is necessary to bring those solutions to bear. So, like, the answers come bottom up. The actual change, a lot of times, can't actually start at the bottom. There's the most impacted people,
What do you view as the role of and the impact of police on society, and especially the more dangerous a neighborhood gets?
I have a very radical view of police.
I could tell a little bit. I think I saw something like on your Instagram profile said something about pigs.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think all police are pieces of shit, like, straight
Is
up.
that any different than saying all black people or all white people are pieces of shit?
Being a policeman
All
is a
principals
choice.
are yeah.
Being a cop is a choice. Being a cop is a choice. So yes, that's different than making racial judgments on people, for sure.
Okay, what about profession? Like that'd be like saying all football coaches are pieces of shit, or all criminals are pieces of shit, or all is a strong statement is what I'm trying to get at.
Sure. I get it's a strong statement, and I'm making it intentionally, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, I think that people who choose as their profession to hunt down and incarcerate other people into slavery are pieces of shit.
But you're making it, just to understand your perspective, the people that they're chasing are the victims and the cops are the perpetrators.
I think that police officers are the enemy. Yeah, I do.
Would you totally abolish them?
Yes.
So empty the prisons, abolish the police.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you would make a safer society?
Yeah, I don't think that. Let me tell you why.
Because this seems like that would be a perfect recipe for absolute chaos, crime, and just like what it is in San Francisco. None of the good guys, the good citizens that are watching their car get bipped, they can't do shit because they're worried that guy's going to shoot them if they even intervene. Like, it seems like almost like we would turn things to purely Gotham City with those two policies. Empty the prison and abolish police.
Well, it's pretty funny because the example you gave is an example from right now where we are, like, more overly policed than we've ever been in the history of this country, and where we have more people in prison than we've ever had in the history of this country, right? So, like, when we say it would turn into such and such, like, it is that, right? Crime is high, violent crime is high, people are in poverty, theft is happening, and we have fucking police on every street corner, and, we're pouring billions of dollars into prisons and police, and it's not saving us. Mm-hmm. It's not protecting us, it's not keeping people safe. It's not. So to get rid of them, in my mind, like, Sure, do we need solutions about how to keep us safe? Yeah, we need that now, right? And we would also need it if we abolish the police and the prisons because we already still need it. Like that is an ongoing need. And what I see in the communities that I serve is that like the police are not helping people, they're not saving people, they're not protecting people. Like their purpose and their job is to protect property, right? And to incarcerate people. Like to arrest people is the primary job of a police officer, is to make arrests, and when you do the work I do and the impacted populations of people, like people from the hood, like poor folks, like they already know this. So I'm not telling folks things that they don't already know, right? But police officers are fucking liars. You know what I'm saying? Like racism is rampant within police departments, whether it's something that they know and do outright and overtly, or whether it's something that's just like built into the structure of being someone who has the privilege to use state violence against other people.
Do you think if police forces could recruit in a way that the fingerprint of the police office was similar to the population, so like let's say racially, gender, whatever. Hey, if the city's 50% black, 25% Mexican, 25% white, do you think if it was more evenly dispersed that there would be a difference in outcomes?
I mean, what you're talking about is reform and not revolution, right? Like, what you're talking about is like, okay, if we're not going to abolish the police, like, how do we make the police better? Do I think that a more diverse police force would be helpful or would be better than what we have now? Sure. I also think it would be better than what we have now if police officers actually came from the communities that they police.
But the thing is, there's a chicken before the egg there, right? Because the amount of volunteers from communities would be extremely low because the attitude from a very young age is fuck the police. So how do you recruit people when the message is fuck them?
Because exactly, right? And that's why I'm not a reformist, right? Like that's saying like, I'm going to buy a fucking house where the foundation is cracked. And then I'm just going to go and try and like, let me try and like work on this a little by little bit, as opposed to bulldozing that thing and starting over. We're not going to fix the police by making small reforms. We're not. The system is too fucked up for that. And we need something different.
Okay. So let's say in the next 2 minutes, someone breaks into this house as we're filming, 3 or 4 guys are pointing guns at us, and they tell us, who do we call if the police aren't here?
If people are pointing guns at you, you're not calling anybody, right?
If you are in danger, if your house has just been, who are we calling to help the situation or to help fix the situation if police are not here?
Right. I mean, if there are no police, you're saying in a world where police
Correct.
are abolished.
Like, how do things get solved?
Right. I mean, like there's this saying in the communities that I work with and serve about like, we protect us, right? So the idea is...
Do you think that's working?
Well, we haven't had the opportunity, right? We haven't had the opportunity because the mindset is, if there's danger happening, we have to call the police. You're going to come here and fucking shoot up the neighborhood, you know what I mean, to solve it. In my experience, police escalate violent situations. They don't stop it. You know what I'm saying? They don't stop violent situations. They escalate violent situations. That's if they even get there on time, if they even are showing up,
Yeah, that's a common complaint by a lot of people in tough neighborhoods, right? Is that like, why bother calling because they're not going to be here for 30, 40 minutes?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be there quick to arrest somebody though, but like not the people who are doing violent crime in that moment. Right. But they'll come looking for people later who they want to arrest because they, especially if they did crime outside the neighborhood, right? If they did crime in a rich neighborhood or if they, robbed somebody or robbed some store, the police are going to come quick and bang your door down and drag people out. But if you call them because you need help and you're from a lot of these neighborhoods, around here, then no, they're not coming, or they're coming way late. Or when they do come, they're as much of a danger to you, the caller, as they are to, the perpetrator. Like we see these cops killing innocent people on a regular basis on accident. You know what I mean? Like shooting like Wild West through walls and killing people in the next door, killing kids, throwing flashbang grenades in their cribs, like just wild stuff. Like training needs to be better.
100%.
Training needs to be better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I don't know if it was Paul, the gentleman we were talking to the other night, is that a lot of these policemen, they go through the academy and then like once a year they'll go to the shooting range or things like that, where it seems like to be competent at any job, a lot of it has to be practice. A lot of it has to be actively practicing the craft. And if you don't have that opportunity with how things are set up, then you're not going to be as effective as you could be. So I think like maybe a little, like a minimum requirement of some sort of jujitsu or wrestling or grappling art would be, I don't know how you would feel comfortable as a cop without having some of those skills. Like if you don't have the ability to know what you're doing with the human body to be able to control somebody in a way that doesn't hurt them and doesn't hurt you, then I feel like you're missing some tools on the job.
Yeah, I think that during conversations like this, I think it's really, we get lost in thinking about the worst case scenario situations, right? Like what are these cops going to do when, someone's shooting up a school, like there's a bomb in the city somewhere that's about to go off in 5 minutes, The reality is that most day-to-day situations, most that cops respond to or that they're called to, don't require armed men to respond, right? Like it doesn't require violence in most of these situations. And that's the main tool that cops have in their toolbook is violence, right? Like what we need to be having are teams of like mental health professionals who respond to emergency situations more often than police.
Is there anywhere that they're experimenting with that style of?
Yeah, I got a cousin in LA. She's a mental health professional, and for a while she did a stint with law enforcement where they were bringing her to a large number of calls and allowing her to try to de-escalate situations before the armed men came in. I do
What was your feedback on that?
The work is really dark. The work is really dark. I think there are more progressive police departments in some places than others that are really trying to do things that would be better than what is happening now. And I appreciate those efforts. I do. Training in de-escalation, what I'm saying? Like, this like cultural awareness type training, anti-racism, anti-bias is what they call it a lot of times.
That unconscious bias stuff?
Yeah, the unconscious bias stuff, like there are some efforts that are being made. Are they good enough? Absolutely not. Are police the biggest gang in the country? Absolutely. And do they use violence primarily? Yes. So I think that they're a big problem. Can I say this real quick for your folks watching? Because I appreciate this conversation, but I also get that it's like a lot of like philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. And what I try to do when I try to use my platform to do is give folks very practical advice about how to handle situations like encounters with police, right? And in any and all encounters with police, right, it needs to be, I'm not talking, don't search me, I want a lawyer. And then you just shut the fuck up until the lawyers come. Like telling your side of the story is something you do to your lawyer, not to the police, because they don't give a fuck and they're going to twist your words and they're going to use it against you at some other point, even when what you're saying is that you are innocent, even if that's the truth, You have to actively say, don't search me, because what most people don't know is if you just remain silent and they start searching you, that means that you agreed. Like silence is consent. So you have to actually tell them, do not search me. They're going to do it anyway. Everyone knows that, right? Like they're going to do it. If they want to, they're going to do it anyway. But that gives your lawyer some action later, when you get into the courtroom where the actual fight happens, because the actual fight, the cop is not the decision maker in the outcome of your case. It's going to be a judge or a jury somewhere. And that's who your audience needs to be, not this cop. And it's so hard to tell the same story, the same true story, the same exact way twice, especially when you're in an intense situation, like when you're dealing with this cop. So I prefer for my clients to only, if they ever have to tell their story, to only tell it one time to the authorities, right? And we do that with me after we've talked about it, after we've practiced, after everyone's calmed down, we get in front of a judge or a jury. That's when we tell our story, not to some fucking Neanderthal armed man who's like there to put you in jail. Like that's not who you tell your story to.
I just find it interesting, like the same like bias, like so the bias that you would be mad at the system having towards, let's say, a black person. You have that same, like, all of you are in one blanket feeling, like you just, so all cops and all Neanderthals are men. It just seems like you guys are, like, it would be like the very people that you're mad at, you're doing the same thing, but on a different scale. Whereas the truth is somewhere in the middle where There's good people in every profession. There's bad people in every profession. There's good people in every neighborhood. There's bad people in every neighborhood.
Sure. I mean, I think that you're what we call equivocating a little bit, right? Like those evils are not the same. But the reason I talk about cops the way I do, I mean, there's like the philosophical reasons and like my politics behind it, right? But when I am giving advice, the reason I talk about cops the way that I do, because like I've met people who are cops who I like as a person, right? Who you can sit in theory, have a good conversation with. I have cops in my family, you know. I'm a military veteran. A lot of veterans are cops, you know. Or a lot of cops are veterans, rather. So, sure. But when I talk about cops the way that I do, when I'm giving advice about how to deal with them, it's because you never know what cop you're getting on any given day, right? And so you have to imagine yourself dealing with the most unreasonable, dangerous, lying-ass cop. Because if you get your guard down when you're dealing with cop A, because he seems like a cool guy, you know what I mean? He's being nice to you. And so you tell him all this bullshit. Guess what? That all goes in the report. And then you deal with cop B and cop C and cop D and DA number 1 and DA number 2. And then you get fucked because you had your guard down with cop A, who you thought was a nice person. You know, like you never know what cop you're getting. Or even if it's nice guy cop, and that morning his fucking dog died or his wife left him or whatever, you know what I mean? Like everyone needs to understand that dealing with an armed person, as law enforcement, can be a very dangerous situation. And most people know that who are the targets. I'm not telling folks things that they don't know, but...
One thing that I learned about communicating with police was in the concealed carry class I took in Wisconsin. And it was actually kind of amazing to me that I got the license to conceal a gun without ever touching a gun or anyone seeing how I operate around a gun. But now I'm legal. But they said that if someone is in your house due to the laws in Wisconsin, it's not a stand your ground state. So if someone was in my house, there's a very specific thing that you say to a 911 operator so you don't put yourself in a position where you, the homeowner that's getting invaded, could get in trouble. And like the idea even that if someone is in your house and you shoot them, that the homeowner can go to prison for that.
Yeah.
And that if you don't say this, like there was pretty much a step of like, she handed out business cards to everyone that had like 4 lines. Like, I'm afraid for my life. I can't talk anymore. Like, and you say your address and then you hang up because otherwise you can be the one getting in trouble. And that to me kind of blew my mind that in a life or death situation where someone is invading your house, that you'd have to worry about what you say.
I can say this is true for all 50 states, right? Is that if you are in fear for your life, like reasonably in fear for your life, you are allowed to use lethal force to defend yourself.
Is it only if the person is facing you? Like if you shoot them in the chest, it's legal, but if for some reason you were to catch them in the back, then that makes it illegal, right?
You cannot shoot someone in the back.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's maybe in Texas, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there are certain states where like in your home, like your home is your domain and you can fucking shoot someone in the back. But in California, and it sounds like also in Wisconsin, like no, you can't shoot someone in the back. You can't shoot someone who's running away. You can't fire warning shots. That's also a big no-no. Like you can't Yosemite Sam and shoot the ground at their feet to try and get them to run away or shoot in the air. Like you cannot do that.
You're responsible for where every bullet goes.
Yes. And if you are pulling out your firearm, it needs to be because you're in fear of your life and you plan to use it. And people think that because of the way the gun laws or how, I don't know, like fucked up liberal state California is that you can't defend yourself, whatever. No, you have the right to self-defense in all 50 states. If you are in fear for your life or the life of others, you can use lethal force to defend yourself. You cannot use lethal force to defend property at all. People always want to ask me about, like, can you shoot a bipper? Not unless your kid's in the car and they're like, like you're afraid for your child's life, then no, you can't shoot a bipper. You can't use lethal force to defend property.
Is there anything else that comes to mind that, hey, if you have, we have a couple minutes left, this is advice that you'd like to tell rappers or people that are navigating the legal system that has helped your clients or that you would like to leave them with, or any final thoughts of?
Sure. Let's talk about cell phones. Can we talk about like cell phones for
Yes.
a minute? Okay. Wiretaps cannot get FaceTime calls, right? Wiretaps cannot get Signal messages or calls.
What about WhatsApp?
WhatsApp, you might as well hand your phone over to the feds.
Really? I thought that was encrypted.
WhatsApp is not safe. WhatsApp is not safe. Your WhatsApp messages can be got with a warrant. They cannot
And you have no idea that they're monitoring you at this point.
No one's ever gonna know if their phone's tapped because it's not old school. Like they don't put something in your phone to tap it, right? Like they just go have a little agreement with the phone company. They send them the warrant, and then the phone company just duplicates those calls and gives them to them.
And do they need some level of probable cause to?
Yeah, they need to get a warrant from a judge, which gives them probable cause. But you're never going to know if that happened until after, and you already catch a case, right? So that's an interesting intellectual discussion, right? But like for you, right, the wiretaps can't get FaceTime calls. Wiretaps can't get signal messages or signal calls, and neither can warrants. Like, I want everyone to be on Signal. Signal's a free app. You download it. It goes on your phone. You can use it on an Android phone or an iPhone.
A lot of the cryptocurrency guys I know are on Signal as well, kind of the libertarian folks.
Sure, right, because Signal doesn't keep the records. It's not like Signal's just like refusing to give them. They don't even have them. They don't even have the records. Those calls and the records of those calls or those messages are not saved at all. It's your normal phone number that you use. You can only communicate with other people who are on Signal.
That makes sense though, the whole FaceTime thing, because I've noticed a lot of the more, I'm trying to think of the proper term to use, but nefarious activity related folks like to talk through FaceTime, and it makes sense now, and I will continue to do that as our channel policy.
Good. Keep doing that. They cannot get your FaceTime. Now, iPhone users, like if you have an Android device, police can break into your phone. They have the technology to break into it, no matter what your passcode is. With a warrant. Okay. They have to have a warrant. I'm just saying that like physically they can get in with a warrant.
Oh, so they're like a jailbreaker kind of.
Correct. If you have an iPhone, if you use the fingerprint unlock or if you use a face unlock, the law enforcement has the technology to just bypass that and get into your phone with a warrant.
Do they have to like take the phone out of your pocket, point it at your face, and then they're in, or is it without you even being in the room?
No, they just plug it into this little thing, or whatever.
Did Apple and Android, do they sell these to law enforcement, or they just law enforcement develop the technology and work? Do they work? They must have worked with Apple or Android engineers to do this.
I'm not sure which hacker it was or where they came from that figured these things out. I don't know if they originated with law enforcement or it was a contractor who worked for whoever. I'm not really sure the origin of that technology. But what I can say is that if you have an iPhone and you use the number passcode only and you use all the maximum digits it'll let you have, it is almost impossible for law enforcement to actually get into your device. Now, they could go get a warrant and get your iCloud. So I always tell people, like, kill your iCloud if you don't want everything that you're sending and messaging and all that shit to automatically get uploaded and then the cops can just go get it. But to get into the actual device, if you have an Android, they can get in. If you have an iPhone, if you have the face unlock or the fingerprint unlock, they can get in without any problems whatsoever, as long as they have a warrant.
That's actually really good to know. And because I don't know if I would say I was more so in the libertarian camp back in the day, and I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle. But I do think that it's really important for citizens to be able to protect the government, the state, the police. They should be an asset to the people, not a liability to the people. And so knowing your rights, knowing how to navigate things, knowing how to keep your information yours is, I think, something that is very important for people to know, and part of being a well-informed citizen of this country, because you're paying tax money in this system, you're living here every day, it should work for you, not against you.
I'm with you on that. Another piece of advice I like to give people that a lot of times I find they don't know is people think that if their phone is in someone else's name, then that means that like that information isn't connected to them, or that law enforcement, they're gonna be like, oh, that wasn't my phone. You know what I mean? Like, no, it doesn't matter whose name it is at all. They have ways of showing who used it. They'll go through your search history, the pictures that are on there, locations, your Google locations. Like I always like to say, Google's a snitch. Like you might not even be making phone calls and all that. But like right now, because my Gmail is logged into my phone, if they went and did a Google location search like that, it would show that my phone was here during this time.
And that's something that they can only do with a warrant, again?
With a warrant.
So what about a standard call, not a non-FaceTime call? Can they track that?
If they have a warrant, they can wiretap regular calls, yes.
But not FaceTime?
Correct.
There's a lot of fellas back home right now that are adjusting their tactics and strategy as they move through the world, and I think that's a good thing. Knowledge is power, and I think there's a lot of ways we can interpret the world, a lot of ways that, and a lot of ways we can think we can build it better. But I think overall, a society, and whether you're talking about people or the police or the government, people that are the more educated we are, the better. So I think this was really informative and helpful for people to hear. Claire, how can people find you? And I don't know if you want people DMing you or not, but
Yeah, I have an Instagram. It's lawyer.claire.white. I try to go live every Friday at 7 p.m. California time, and usually it is a lot less professional than this. I'm usually sitting in my car with a bottle of bourbon, blunt rolled, and some music playing. But this is what we talk about. I give direct legal tips, and I save as many of those episodes as I can, so you can go on my little IGTV and I talk about cars and what to do if you shoot somebody and how to fire a lawyer and just all the things.
What to do if you shoot somebody?
Yeah, it's a real thing that happens.
I'm hoping I never have to look at that video for advice, but if I do, I know where to find it.
Yeah, I mean, you can check out my Instagram. In terms of actually hiring me, that's a lot harder to do. I stay very full, yes, you can DM me. Just understand I do not get to almost any of my DMs. Most of the time I don't. Sometimes I'll answer them. It's shot in the dark, you know what I mean? But you can email me to claire@dopelawgroup.com.
Good name, good branding. I like it.
Thank you. Some people love it or hate it. And the best way to get a hold of me is through someone who already knows me. So I know that's always tough, but that's the best way to get a hold of me. And yeah, that's what I got.
Well, thank you guys for taking a deep dive into the legal world. I hope you learned something today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Peace.